Since Darwin's theory of evolution, it has been widely held that living organisms progress over time. But in his new book, Full House, renowned paleontologist Jay Gould challenges this fundamental view. He argues that variety, rather than progress, is the reality of our evolution. Professor of geology at Harvard, Gould has written 15 books and over 200 essays, and I am very happy to have him back on this broadcast. Welcome back.
Happy to be here again.
All right. Evolution. My idea is that evolution is about progress. It is about survival of the fittest. It is about generation after generation getting better and more, achieving more perfectionism.
The standard misconception, which is imposed by deep biases of Western culture. Darwin, in fact, never said that. He recognized as one of the radical claims he was making that there was nothing in his mechanism of natural selection that led to any belief in progress, because natural selection is just a principle of adaptation to changing local environments. You improve only in the sense that you get better for your local environment, right. But your local environment may be to be a parasite in the inside of another organism, in which case simplification is going to do you well. So there's many environments in which simplicity is valued and confers just as much adaptive advantage as complexity in other environments. Therefore, there's no general trend in the history of life. The dominant forms of life on Earth are bacterial, always have been. This is a bacterial world. It's not a human world.
Age of bacteria.
It's always been the age of bacteria. Life started 3.5 billion years ago with bacteria, and they've dominated ever since.
And the reason because it's the age of bacteria is because they dominate. They survive, they dominate, they have more what?
They have more of everything. They live in a broader range of environments. They live at several hundred degrees centigrade where water's coming out of superheated water's coming out of cracks in the Earth's surface. They live up to 10 miles down under the Earth where little holes in rocks where water percolates through. There are more E. coli cells in the gut of every human being on Earth today than there have ever been human beings on Earth. Bacteria have dominated for 3.5 billion years. They were in the beginning, are now, and will be till the sun explodes, the dominant creatures on Earth. And if this recent report on Martian life is true, I'm not betting on it, but it's a plausible case, because Mars had running water.
Because they found bacteria.
Well, Mars had running water early in its history, and the Earth, under similar conditions, did evolve life of bacterial grade. So if that's true, bacterial domination is interplanetary, if not universal, and I don't see little green men everywhere. No, we have a false view because we take a very parochial peek at the most complex thing through time. It's true the most complex organism has gotten more complex. Once there were only bacteria, now there are people. But if you look at the full range, the full house of my title, of life's diversity, what you see is that bacteria have always dominated throughout the history of life.
Why do you call it the spread of excellence from Plato to Darwin?
Kind of a joke. It's not a chronological history of excellence, but I'm making a plea that we substitute for the old Platonic view of the world. Under the Platonic view of the world, you look at variable systems like human beings who come in all sizes, races, sexes, colors, shapes, ages, and you try and get a single measure of the ideal human or the extremely valued trait, and then you trace that through time. So you say that human brain size increases through time. What Darwin told us is that's wrong. There is no single number, there's no ideal, there's no abstraction, there's only the variation itself. And it's the variation itself that constitutes the ultimate reality. That's the spread of excellence. And if we analyze the full variation, then we'll see that bacteria dominate. If we study the full variation, we'll see that 400 hitting has disappeared in baseball because the variation has shrunk, not because hitting's gotten worse.
Okay, well, let's explain. Slow down, and let's explain that better. Ted Williams in 1941
hit
here 400.
406.
406. And we have not had a 400 hitter since then. But baseball players in general have gotten better, stronger, better.
Oh, that's the paradox, Charlie, because between 1900 and 1930, 400 averages were achieved by 7 different players in 9 of those years, so it was pretty common and hasn't been done for 55 years. So most people assume that has to mean that hitting has gotten worse in some sense, which doesn't make sense for exactly the reason you said. Everything in sports gets better. People are bigger, stronger, better trained. There are more of us. Men of all races can play now. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. But we're stuck in our old Platonic habits. You see, we think 400 hitting is a thing. a thing measuring excellence, and that it went away, and therefore hitting has to have gotten worse. And we try and invent some reason. Too many night games. They aren't as tough as they used to be, like Ty Cobb.
Or Ted Williams was a Mozart of our time.
Yeah, right. No, Ted Williams himself actually believes those notions, but it doesn't make any sense. You have to reconceptualize the whole issue. 400 hitting is not a thing. It's simply the extreme value in a range of variation of batting averages. There are several hundred major league players. Each one compiles a batting average each year. You can make a frequency distribution, or bell curve as it's called, of those batting averages. And when you do that, it's very interesting. The average batting average has never changed in the history of baseball.
260.
It's always been around 260. It varies a little bit, but then they change the rules to bring it back. Now, but a batting average isn't like running a mile or throwing a discus. It's not an absolute measure. It's a balance. It's a balance between hitting and pitching, or hitting and other aspects of the game. So the fact that it's stayed 260 doesn't mean that absolute quality of play is the same. I think what it means is that hitting and pitching have gotten better together. The balance has been maintained, so the average batting average is still 260. Now, all that's happened, as everyone's gotten better, the variation has shrunk. Baseball hasn't changed any major rule in 100 years. It's very characteristic of systems that play by unaltered.
As everyone's gotten better, the variation has shrunk.
Yeah, there are not as many high average, no more 400, but there are no more 150 averages either. I would think of it this way. There'll always be a few people who are right near the limit of what a human body can do. They're just about as good as a body can get. And Ty Cobb was there in 1910. Tony Gwynn is there today. Wade Boggs was a few years ago. But in 1910, the average level of play was so much worse than that maximal extreme performance that Ty Cobb's performance could be measured as 420. Today, Tony Gwynn is as good as Cobb, maybe a little better for all I know. The average level of play is so much better that Gwynn doesn't stand as far above this much improved average, and therefore it's the shrinking of the variation. The average is still measured as 260 because it's a balance between...
Okay, but I still don't understand why nobody's hit 400.
Oh, it will happen someday. I mean, Tony Gwynn was 392 and rising. And Ted Williams hit 388 the year he turned 39 years old. Yeah. 5 more hits and he would have had 400. So it will happen again, but it will never happen with the same frequency because there's so much less variation around this preserved constant batting average of 260.
Okay, as I still don't understand that. You got to help me understand that because I'm slow. Because there's still so much more grouping around the variation shrinking, there's so much more grouping, and the level is better and the performance is better. Why would that prevent more people not just being on the right side of the curve? Why would that limit the number of 400 hitters?
I put it this way.
I mean, I don't understand statistics, obviously.
Yeah, no, this is not even a statistical argument. Let's suppose this is I'll call it the right wall of limits based on human bodies.
Right.
You know, we're never going to hit a ball a mile or pitch one 200 miles an hour. Let's assume that there's always some extraordinary human beings who, by dint of great genetic gift or obsessive commitment and training, they're sitting right next to this wall of human limits. And this is a line representing how good you are. Now, in 1910, the average player was way down here. He wasn't very good. He was batting 260 because the pitching wasn't very good and the batting wasn't good. Ty Cobb's standing right here. He's right next to the wall. You can't get any better. He's so far away from this 260 average that his performance is measured as 420. He can get a lot of hits. Now, today, as everybody has gotten better, the average level of play has moved right up here. Yeah. Still called 260 because of the balance between hitting and pitching. Tony Gwynn standing right here where Cobb was, but he's not as far away from the average anymore. There's just much less spread, much less variation around this average 260 performance. It's as though you took the greatest symphony orchestras in the world and just took the violinists out of the greatest symphony orchestras and compiled their range of variation. The best one wouldn't be that much better than the average, but if you then take a sample at random of high school violin players throughout the country, and you got the very best one, he'd be up here, but the average might be way down here. Yeah. So the best high school violin player in the country would be better than the average of any music class, but so I think it's that phenomenon.
Now prove the point by your own relationship to cancer.
Yeah, I'm making the same. About 12 years ago, I had a supposedly fatal cancer, and clearly it wasn't. And as soon as I woke up and got myself to the library to read the literature.
What did the doctor tell you?
The doctor said, don't bother to read anything. Nothing's been written that's very good.
And he said you've got, what, 8 months to live?
No, she just didn't want me to read anything because she didn't realize that as an intellectual I'd be able to interpret it right. Yeah. So I go to the library and I get all these articles and I read abdominal mesothelioma, invariably fatal, median life expectancy after diagnosis, 8 months. Okay. Now most people would read that because we have this Platonic tendency to think the average is what's going to happen to everybody. Right. Most people say, oh my God, that means I'll probably be dead in 8 months. But I've had statistical training and I believe that every individual is an individual and that the average doesn't mean a whole lot. It's just an abstraction for calculation. So I realized that's not what it means. It doesn't mean I'll probably be dead in 8 months. It means that of all the people who have this disease, half indeed do die within 8 months of diagnosis. But there's a whole other half that live longer. And the question I had to ask was, am I likely to be in that other half that lives longer? And since half are going to die between 0 and 8 months, that doesn't leave a whole lot of space for the lower half of the curve. But the upper half of the curve could extend out to normal lifetimes. And I quickly realized I was young, the disease was pretty early, I was having excellent treatment. I said, hey, I'm going to be in this upper half. It doesn't mean I'm going to be dead in 8 months, it means I'll be in the upper half. And let's see if I can be on the very right tail of that upper half. And
so what put you in that upper half then?
I think I don't want to mystically argue that it was good attitude. I think it was a lot of tough treatments, mostly chemotherapy.
But you do think good attitude made a difference?
Let me put it this way, in very difficult times, it certainly made those couple of years of my life a lot easier, and who knows?
Yeah, it's in remission.
If not totally cured.
Not totally cured. Yeah. Because you believed and you took it on your own to look at the numbers.
No, I think it got cured because there was good medical treatment. Yeah, right. But I do think that being able to interpret the statistics properly was enormously life-affirming and saving during that time.
Why is evolution so fascinating for you?
I think it's one of the great scientific subjects. After all, science cannot answer deep questions about the ultimate meaning of life. Those are religious and philosophical questions. But insofar as science can at all get at questions that are bound to fascinate us, like who are we, how long have we been here, who are we related to, where did we come from, that's all within the domain of evolutionary theory. We're fascinated with the history of life. We want to know how our physical and mental constitution as it's evolved affects our prospects, our lives, our relationships to others. So evolutionary theory is one of the great popular subjects of the sciences for that reason.
And how long have you been thinking about this book?
Oh, 10 or 15 years. It's a short book, but it has all these little pieces, the cancer story, the baseball story we talked about, the evolution of the horses, the bacterial domination, and all of them are explained by reconceptualizing the world to look at full ranges of variation as they expand or contract through time, rather than the fallacious way we like to look at trends, namely things moving somewhere.
Yeah. And do you hope it has impact beyond our understanding of the intellectual arguments that you make?
One would hope so, but I don't want to be overly egotistical. One would hope that if we could ever understand and really comprehend that our pseudo-scientific arguments for human domination and human superiority are really nothing more than cultural bias, perhaps we would have a greater respect for this earth and this environment and for the diversity of our fellows.
It's a cultural bias that we have, that we make the argument that humans are superior.
I think we're so desperate. It's a mixture of arrogance and fear. Both of them lead us to want to validate our own existence as somehow absolutely necessary.
As soon as you say that, somebody's sitting in a bar saying, Dr. Gould, how many bacteria have won a Nobel Prize?
Well, they don't win Nobel Prizes, but how many Nobel laureates can live in little spaces in the rock 10 miles down, and how many Nobel laureates were around 3.5 billion years ago when bacteria were? Depends on your criterion.
How fast is and this is a stupid question, but how fast is our understanding growing? Are we growing because of technology, because of a lot of other things, because of the tools that we have at hand?
Oh, no.
Is there a huge acceleration in our capacity to grasp and understand this world that we live in, and those questions that you asked?
Yes, I think so, Charlie, but I don't think it has anything to do with physical evolution of the brain. The human brain has been stable for tens of thousands of years. The people who painted those caves at Lascaux 10 or 20,000 years ago are us. Yeah. And so all that we call human civilization, from the building of the first cities and agriculture in Jericho to the Empire State Building and thermonuclear war, it's all been done with a brain of the same capacity in just a few thousand years. Now, a few thousand years is an evolutionary eye blink. There's been nothing like it in the history of the planet, and it's all been done without any further evolutionary change in the size of the brain. So it's all the power of what we call cultural or technological change. It's not biological evolution. Biological evolution brought us to the capacity to do so, but everything from the first city to today has been done without any biological change.
Did your battle with cancer change your attitude about living and about...
I think it does for many people, and I really wish it had, because it was a very unpleasant couple of years, and I'd like to say, hey, you know, it really gave me great insight, but I don't know. I was always so committed to working my hardest all the time, as if every day would be my last.
You still had the passion to teach, and the passion to communicate, and the passion to write, and the passion to understand.
Basically, I think it was just a hard time that had to be gotten through.
What's next for you? What are you working on? I mean, what's in your head as the work that you...
Well, I'm going to write those monthly essays till the millennium, which is either January 2000 or January 2001.
So you collect those essays are always
packagable. I'm also working on a long technical book on the structure of evolutionary theory, which will be a university press 2-volume monstrosity before the millennium, and lots of other projects.
Yeah. Full House, Stephen Jay Gould, The Spread of Excellence from Plato, Darwin, author, as many of you know, of Dinosaur in a Haystack, and some, let me count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 books. This is his 15th Full House. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
It's
Joe.
always great to see you.
Always happy to be here.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.